Hey guys, welcome back. So right here I've got a 2011, pardon me, this thing was a hell of a job to push this thing in. 2011 Jeep Patriot with a 2.4 in it. It is 4-wheel drive, automatic as you can see. Now, won't start. So, I've already scanned the computer, had some codes in it, but I'm going to show you. Now, before I go any farther, this same Jeep was in here last week, and I put a crank position sensor in it. If the crank position sensor is bad, the vehicle will not start. Let me rephrase. If the crank position sensor is not sending a signal to the PCM, the vehicle will not start. Without a signal from the crank, the computer will not turn on the ASD relay, and it will not fire the coil packs, and it will not fire the injectors. So, the easiest way to see if you have a crank signal, turn your key on. I can hear the fuel pump run through its prime cycle. Watch your tachometer. Tachometer should be showing RPM during cranking. Normally you wouldn't notice that because it wouldn't crank that long before it started. So it'd start cranking, you'd see the tach bounce a second and fire right up. If you plug a scan tool in it, you can look at the engine RPM and you can see that it's not getting a signal from, because it will show you cranking RPM if the crank position sensor is good. Plug in a scan tool to it, it's not showing you any engine RPM. So I'm going to say we also did have a code for a crank sensor circuit code. I'm going to say the crank sensor is shot again. Now, I replaced the crank sensor last week with a BWD from a local parts store. Let's get my cart over here. I normally would not have done that with one of these cars, but my local Chrysler dealer was having computer issues that day, and we were trying to get this done to get it back to the customer, so I couldn't get a Chrysler crank sensor. So like I said, I went with the parts store. I think that was a mistake, because as I found out, the owners of the vehicle had already replaced it once with a crank sensor from the parts store. Now, in order to get to the crank sensor, let me pull this off. Oh, we're going to go ahead and remove the engine cover. Just lift up. Set that off to the side. Now, should be either a Phillips screwdriver or a 10 millimeter. We're going to have to get the air box out of the way. So, nope, that's an 8. Oh, that's one of those days. As you can see, they tell you not to unplug this to open the air box. So lift that out of the way. I'm going to give it a swift tug upward, and you pull the 3 little prongs out of the 3 little rubber grommets. I'm going to set this off to the side. Now, in order to get to the crank sensor, you have to remove the heat shield. There's a 10 millimeter nut right up here on top. There's a 13 millimeter bolt down here. Down here in the bottom, and then the crank sensor is back behind that. But I'm going to try and at least get you a shot of where the crank sensor is. So we'll get the, I'm trying to get these out of the way as much as possible. I'll get this upper bolt that's right behind this lifting eye, or nut rather. We'll get the nut off. It's a stud. And then and get to the lower one. I know you guys don't have a very good view here. It's way back in there. Okay. There's the 13. Now I can move. I should be able to move the heat shield back out of my way. And actually the wiring for the crank sensor clips to it, so you gotta unclip that too, which is easier said than done. There we go. Get that unclipped, and then voila. And then I'll try and show you this the best I can. I'll stick you guys right there. Light back in here. Hopefully this shows up. But the crank sensor is right there. This wire goes into the crank sensor. So you can see there's one bolt that holds it in. Be a 10 millimeter. Unplug it, take the bolts out, the sensor comes right out. So let me do that, and then we'll get the old sensor out and put the new sensor in. You guys were sitting right here on this rear engine mount, so hopefully that puts it in perspective. You guys were sitting right down there looking in that way. Alright, so we got the old one out. It doesn't look bad, but wondering if it didn't get hot over here. You kind of see how that's real rough. That side's more smooth. I don't know, but this was a BWD. This is the new Mopar sensor. Almost look identical, don't they? There's the part number. Actually, this thing is easy to get to. I mean it. Here we go. Blind, I can't see anything, I'm just feeling for it. Okay, that's plugged in. Now it's time for the heat shield. Let's see. Something like that. You gotta get the bottom bolt started first, which is an absolute pain. We're going for our nut on our upper heat shield. Need to clip our wires off to it again. There we go. And then there's another clip down here that you couldn't see. There we go. Now, we can put our air box back in. Just line up little tabs, push down, and don't forget to connect your PCV hose right there. And then the airbox lid. Okay. That's done. Now we can put this stuff away. And place the engine cover. And the airbox inlet. Fired right up. So, we'll set up check engine light. I'll scan it. We'll clear the codes. We'll make sure everything's good. And we'll return it to the customer.